Nathan had barely settled into his evening when his phone rang. The unfamiliar number on the screen made him hesitate, but something compelled him to answer. "Hello?" he said, trying to mask the apprehension in his voice. "Mr. Nathan Williams?" a calm yet somber voice asked. "Yes, this is he. This is Dr. Reynolds from Denver General Hospital. I'm calling regarding your wife, Emily." The world seemed to slow down. "Emily? She's in Florida visiting her family," Nathan said, his voice betraying his confusion. "I'm afraid that's not the case. Emily is here in our burn unit after being admitted from a major fire incident. She's stable but has sustained severe burns. We need you to come as soon as possible." Nathan's legs nearly gave out as the words sank in. His mind raced. Why Colorado? Why hadn't she told him? 1,000 questions, none with immediate answers. "I'll be on the next flight," he managed to choke out before hanging up. The airport was a blur of desperate phone calls and hastily packed bags. His calls to Emily's family were met with equal confusion. They hadn't seen or heard from her in weeks. When he tried calling her phone, it went straight to voicemail. Each unanswered call added to the gnawing pit in his stomach. On the plane, his mind swirled with worst-case scenarios. Why was Emily in Colorado? Who was she with? The pieces didn't fit, and every attempt to make sense of it only deepened the mystery. When Nathan arrived at the hospital, the antiseptic smell and fluorescent lights made the situation feel all the more surreal. A nurse led him to Emily's room, warning him gently about her appearance. Emily lay on the bed, her face partially obscured by bandages. Her once vibrant eyes now looked hollow, distant. Despite her injuries, she gave a faint smile when she saw him. "Nathan," she whispered, her voice raspy. "Emily," he said, gripping her hand tightly. "What happened? Why were you here?" Her lips trembled as tears welled up in her eyes. "But I didn't mean for any of this." Before she could elaborate, the doctor entered, cutting the conversation short. Dr. Reynolds explained Emily's condition and the extent of her injuries, mentioning that she was rescued from a fire at a motel on the outskirts of Denver. Nathan's stomach churned at the mention of a motel. What was she doing there? The days that followed were a whirlwind of revelations. Nathan's first clue came when he retrieved Emily's belongings from the hospital. Among them was her phone, miraculously undamaged. As he scrolled through it, his blood ran cold. There were messages from an unknown number, texts that spoke of secret meetings and professions of love. One particular message stood out. "I'll see you at the motel tonight. Can't wait to be with you again." Nathan felt as though the ground had been ripped out from under him. The pieces began to fall into place. Emily wasn't in Colorado by accident. She was meeting someone. Had this fire been a karmic retribution for her betrayal? Confrontation was inevitable. The next time he visited Emily, he couldn't hide the turmoil on his face. "Who is he?" he asked bluntly. Emily looked away, tears streaming down her face. "It's not what you think." "Then what is it?" Nathan's voice cracked. "You lied about Florida. You were in a motel in Colorado. Explain this to me, Emily. Make it make sense." She sobbed, the weight of the situation crushing her. "His name is Mark," she admitted. "We met online months ago. It was supposed to be harmless, just talking. But it escalated." Nathan felt like he'd been punched in the gut. "Escalated? So you flew across the country to meet him? While I thought you were with your family?" Emily's silence was deafening. The betrayal in her eyes was mirrored by his shattered trust. "The fire, it happened while we were together. He ran out, left me there. But I thought I was going to die, Nathan." Nathan's hands trembled. He wanted to scream, to rage at her, but the sight of her fragile body stopped him. "He left you?" His voice was barely a whisper. Emily nodded. "He saved himself. The firefighters pulled me out." As the days passed, more humiliating details came to light. Nathan discovered that Mark wasn't just some stranger. He was a married man who had been stringing Emily along, promising her an escape from her mundane life. Nathan tracked him down through a reverse phone lookup, learning that Mark had returned to his life as if nothing had happened, leaving Emily to deal with the fallout. When Nathan confronted him, Mark denied everything at first but crumbled when Nathan presented the text messages. It was a mistake, Mark pleaded. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Nathan's disgust was palpable. You left her to die. A mistake doesn't even begin to cover what you've done. Emily's recovery was slow, both physically and emotionally. She confessed to Nathan that her affair had stemmed from feelings of inadequacy and a need for validation. While Nathan struggled to process her betrayal, he couldn't ignore the guilt that ate away at her. Still, forgiveness was a distant possibility. The hospital room became a battleground for their fractured marriage. Emily begged for another chance, while Nathan wrestled with the decision to stay or leave. Every visit felt like a test of his resolve, the weight of their shared history clashing with the fresh wound of her betrayal. The aftermath of the fire left scars that ran deeper than Emily's burns. For Nathan, the ordeal was a stark reminder of how easily trust could be shattered and how betrayal could ignite a chain reaction of pain and devastation. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with unanswered questions and a lingering ache that refused to subside. Nathan sat alone in the living room, the flickering light from the television casting long shadows across the walls. Emily was still in the hospital, and he had returned home to handle the mounting tasks of work and life that didn't pause for anyone's personal crises. Yet, as much as he tried to keep moving, his mind was a storm. He couldn't shake the memory of her whispered confession. His name is Mark. But something didn't add up. Mark was real. Nathan had confronted him and seen his cowardice firsthand, but the story felt incomplete. Emily's behavior wasn't that of someone who'd simply been lured by an online fling. There was something more, and Nathan was determined to find it. Emily's laptop sat innocently on the dining table, untouched since before her trip. Nathan had avoided it for days, hesitant to dig further into the betrayal. But as doubt gnawed at him, he realized that the only way to uncover the truth was to confront it head-on. He opened the laptop, Emily's password popping into his mind almost automatically. It was their wedding date, something that, under different circumstances, might have made him smile. The desktop loaded, revealing a clutter of folders and files. His fingers hovered over the trackpad before clicking on her email. Scrolling through her inbox, he found the usual work emails, promotions, and messages from friends. But then, buried in the drafts folder, he saw a string of emails addressed to someone named Michael Carter. His heart stopped. Michael Carter? A name he hadn't thought about in years. Michael was Emily's ex-boyfriend, the man she had dated for 3 years before meeting Nathan. Their breakup had been messy, filled with accusations of infidelity on Michael's part. Emily had sworn she was done with him, that he was a chapter of her life she never wanted to revisit. Yet here he was in her email drafts. Nathan opened one of the emails. It was dated 2 weeks before Emily's supposed trip to Florida. Michael, I can't stop thinking about you. I know we said we wouldn't do this again, but I can't help it. I need to see you. I'll book the flight and meet you in Denver like we talked about. Please don't let me regret this. Emily. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. She had planned this. There was no accident, no spur-of-the-moment decision. She had deliberately lied, booked a flight, and met Michael in Denver, all while feeding Nathan the story about visiting her parents. Nathan's hands trembled as he navigated to her messages. The text chain with Michael was still there. He scrolled back, his chest tightening with every exchange. Michael, I can't wait to see you. Are you sure you can pull this off without him finding out? Emily, don't worry. Nathan believes I'm with my family. He's too trusting for his own good. The betrayal was like a knife twisting deeper with each message. They had joked about him, mocked his trust, and schemed their rendezvous as if he were nothing more than an obstacle to their happiness. Nathan felt his face flush with humiliation, the sting of being played by the woman he had vowed to love and protect. His rage boiled over when he found a folder labeled Photos. Inside were pictures of Emily and Michael together in Denver. There were shots of them at a park, holding hands, laughing, and even a selfie taken in what appeared to be the motel room. Her injuries from the fire now took on a different context. She hadn't just been in the wrong place at the wrong time, she had been with him. But the most damning evidence was a video. Nathan hesitated before playing it, already knowing it would break him further. The screen flickered to life, showing Emily sitting on a motel bed. Michael held the camera, his voice teasing. Say something for the camera. Emily smiled, a genuine, carefree smile Nathan hadn't seen in years. I can't believe I'm here with you, she said. Nathan slammed the laptop shut, unable to watch another second. His hands clenched into fists as he fought the urge to throw the laptop across the room. He had never felt so humiliated, so utterly destroyed. The woman he loved, the life they had built together, it all felt like a cruel joke. The next day, Nathan decided to confront Emily's family. They had been supportive when he called to tell them about the fire, but now their behavior seemed suspicious in hindsight. Why hadn't they been more shocked when he mentioned Denver? Why hadn't they asked more questions? He called Emily's father, Robert, who answered on the second ring. Nathan, how's Emily doing? Robert asked, his tone warm. Nathan's voice was cold. I need to talk to you. About Emily. There was a pause. Of course. What's on your mind? I know she wasn't in Florida. I know she was with Michael Carter in Denver, Nathan said, each word like a dagger. Robert sighed, and the sound confirmed Nathan's worst fears. Nathan, listen. You knew. Nathan's voice rose. You knew and you lied to me. You covered for her. It wasn't like that, Robert stammered. Emily thought she was confused. She needed closure, and I didn't think it was my place to interfere. Not your place. Nathan barked. You helped her cheat on me, Robert. Do you have any idea what this has done to me? Robert tried to calm him down, but his excuses only made things worse. He admitted that he had known about the trip, that Emily had confided in him, and that he had even driven her to the airport. I thought it was just one meeting. I didn't think it would go this far. Nathan hung up, unable to listen to another word. His humiliation was complete. Not only had his wife betrayed him, but her family, people he had trusted and loved, had been complicit. They had smiled in his face while covering for her lies, making him the fool in their twisted game. When Nathan visited Emily at the hospital that evening, his anger was barely contained. He held her laptop in his hands as he entered her room. Who is Michael Carter? He asked, his voice low and dangerous. Emily's eyes widened. Nathan, don't lie to me, he snapped. I've seen the emails, the messages, the photos. Your father told me everything. So don't you dare lie. Emily burst into tears, but Nathan didn't feel an ounce of sympathy. I trusted you. I believed in you, and you spat on everything we built together. Was I just a placeholder for you? Someone to fill the void until you could go running back to him? It wasn't like that, Emily sobbed. I was confused. I made a mistake. A mistake? Nathan laughed bitterly. You planned this. You lied to me, to everyone. And then your mistake left you to die in a fire. How poetic. Emily reached for his hand, but he pulled away. You don't get to cry and beg for forgiveness. Not this time. The humiliation was unbearable, but so was the realization that he still loved her despite everything. As he stormed out of the hospital, he felt the crushing weight of betrayal settle over him, suffocating and inescapable. The fire that tore through the outskirts of Denver started as an unassuming plume of smoke rising from the parched hills, unnoticed until it was far too late. The winds picked up, spreading the flames with terrifying speed. Within hours, the wildfire engulfed everything in its path. Houses turned to ashes, lives were upended, and emergency services struggled to respond fast enough to the disaster. Emily and Michael were in the motel when the firestorm swept through the area. Their illicit rendezvous, meant to be a secret escape from reality, turned into a desperate fight for survival. The flames reached the motel so quickly that guests barely had time to react. Alarms blared, smoke filled the hallways, and chaos erupted. Nathan didn't know any of this yet. He sat at home, staring blankly at the television, his mind replaying Emily's betrayal over and over again. He had thought the worst was behind him after uncovering her affair, but something about her silence since their last conversation gnawed at him. When his phone rang that night, he expected it to be another family member calling to discuss Emily's condition. Instead, it was Dr. Reynolds again, and the grim tone in his voice sent a chill down Nathan's spine. Mr. Williams, I need to inform you that another patient from the same fire as your wife has been admitted to our burn unit, Dr. Reynolds said. His name is Michael Carter. The name hit Nathan like a slap. His grip tightened on the phone. Michael Carter? He's here? Yes, Dr. Reynolds confirmed. He and your wife were both caught in the fire. From what we've been told, they were in the same vicinity when it happened. Nathan's stomach churned. His mind flashed to the photos, the emails, the betrayal. They hadn't just been caught in the fire together, they had been together when it started. Emily's memories of the fire were fragmented. She remembered the heat, the suffocating smoke, and Michael's panicked face as he shouted for her to run. She remembered stumbling over furniture in their motel room, blinded by smoke, and the distant screams of other guests. The fire had spread so quickly that there was no time to think, only react. Michael had tried to help her at first, grabbing her arm and dragging her toward the door. But when the flames breached the hallway, he panicked. He let go of her, pushing past others in a desperate bid to escape. Emily screamed his name, but he didn't look back. The heat was unbearable, and Emily collapsed near the stairwell, her skin blistering as the fire closed in. She thought she was going to die, but then she felt hands pulling her up. A firefighter, clad in heavy gear, carried her out of the inferno and into the fresh air. The last thing she remembered before losing consciousness was the sound of sirens and the cool relief of oxygen being forced into her lungs. Michael wasn't as lucky. He had made it outside but lingered too close to the blaze, his panic rendering him unable to fully escape. When the fire shifted direction, it engulfed him, leaving him with burns over much of his body. Paramedics found him collapsed on the ground, barely breathing. He was rushed to the same hospital as Emily, both of them now bound together not just by their affair but by the shared trauma of the fire. When Nathan arrived at the hospital, he demanded to see both Emily and Michael. The nurse hesitated but eventually led him to Emily's room first. She was unrecognizable, her face and arms covered in bandages. Machines beeped around her, monitoring her fragile condition. For a moment, Nathan felt a pang of pity, but it was quickly overshadowed by the anger that still burned in his chest. Was it worth it? He asked, his voice cold. Was he worth destroying everything? Emily's eyes fluttered open, her voice weak and raspy. Nathan? Don't, he snapped. Don't try to explain. I know everything. I know you lied to me, that you were with him. Tears streamed down her bandaged cheeks. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. You didn't mean for what to happen? The affair? The fire? Or both? Nathan's voice was sharp, each word cutting like a knife. You chose to betray me, Emily. And now you're lying here, and he's in this same hospital. Do you even realize how humiliating this is for me? Emily sobbed, her body trembling. I never wanted to hurt you. Nathan stepped closer, his fists clenched at his sides. But you did. And you dragged your lover into this mess with you. Do you know what that makes you? Reckless. Selfish. Pathetic. Nathan left her room without another word, his anger propelling him toward Michael's. The nurses tried to stop him, but he pushed past, determined to face the man who had not only stolen his wife but now shared in the disgrace of their actions. Michael was in even worse shape than Emily. His burns were severe, his face barely recognizable. He was conscious but groggy from painkillers. When Nathan entered, Michael's eyes widened in fear. You, Nathan said, his voice low and dangerous. You're the one she threw everything away for? Michael struggled to speak, his voice hoarse. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Save your breath, Nathan spat. I don't want your excuses. I just want to know one thing. Did you leave her to die in that fire? Michael's eyes filled with tears. I didn't mean to. I panicked. You panicked? Nathan barked a bitter laugh. You were so brave sneaking around with my wife, but when it came down to it, you abandoned her. What kind of man are you? Michael couldn't meet Nathan's gaze, his shame evident. I'm sorry, he whispered. Nathan leaned in, his voice ice cold. You're not sorry for what you did to me. You're sorry you got caught. And now you're lying here, disfigured, just like her. I hope it was worth it. The humiliation of the situation weighed heavily on Nathan as he walked out of the hospital. His wife and her lover, both burned and broken, were a living testament to their betrayal. The wildfire had destroyed more than just buildings. It had exposed the fragility of the life he thought he had built. And as much as he wanted to walk away from it all, he couldn't shake the feeling that the scars left by this ordeal would haunt him forever. Nathan sat in the corner of the hospital waiting room, his head in his hands. He hadn't slept in days. The weight of betrayal, humiliation, and the grim reality of Emily and Michael's injuries had hollowed him out. But amid the sadness, anger smoldered. It burned hotter each time he replayed the conversations in his head, Emily's lies, Michael's cowardice, and Robert's complicity in the entire sordid affair. The tipping point came when Robert called him that morning, a tone of fake concern laced in his voice. "Nathan," Robert began, "I know things are strained right now, but we're all family. Emily needs us. We need to come together." "Family?" Nathan spat into the phone. "Don't insult me. You stopped being my family the moment you helped her destroy our marriage." Robert sighed, a patronizing sound that grated on Nathan's nerves. "You don't understand. She was struggling. She needed someone to talk to." "Struggling?" Nathan's voice rose. "She was screwing her ex-boyfriend behind my back, Robert. And you not only knew, but you covered for her. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is for me? How dare you call me and preach about family?" Robert's tone hardened. "I was trying to protect my daughter." Nathan's rage exploded. "No, you were trying to enable her selfishness. You watched her tear me apart, and you did nothing. Don't ever call me again." He hung up, his hands shaking. But he wasn't done. He needed closure, something to put an end to this nightmare. And closure, he decided, would come on his terms. The argument with Robert escalated when they met a week later at the hospital. Nathan had gone to collect Emily's personal items after she succumbed to her injuries, her body unable to recover from the burns and infections. He didn't expect to see Robert and the rest of her family there, gathered solemnly outside her room. Robert approached him cautiously. "Nathan, I know you're angry, but let's not do this here." "Oh, we're doing this right here," Nathan said, his voice trembling with fury. "You don't get to play the grieving father when you're the reason she's dead." Gasps echoed through the hallway. Emily's mother, Linda, clutched her pearls, and her younger sister, Claire, shrank back. "How dare you?" Linda hissed. "We're all in pain." "Pain?" Nathan turned to her, his voice dripping with venom. "You want to talk about pain? Try being the idiot husband who trusted your daughter while she laughed at him behind his back. Try being the man who worked his ass off to make her happy, only to find out she was screwing some loser in a motel." Robert stepped forward, his face red with anger. "That's enough, Nathan." "No," Nathan growled. "Enough is what you should have said to her when she came crying to you about Michael. But you didn't. You drove her to the airport. You lied to me. You betrayed me just as much as she did." Linda began to sob, and Claire tried to comfort her. But Nathan didn't care. He was past caring. He turned to leave, but not before delivering his final blow. "I'll handle her ashes. Don't expect an invitation. None of you deserve to be there." Nathan's plan for Emily's ashes was anything but traditional. There would be no respectful scattering in a serene meadow, no heartfelt speeches or tears of remembrance. Emily had made a mockery of their marriage, and Nathan intended to make a mockery of her memory in return. He picked up the urn from the crematorium, its smooth surface cold in his hands. He drove in silence, the only sound the hum of the engine as he made his way to Rocky Mountain National Park. It was a place they had visited once, years ago, during happier times. The irony of choosing it as the stage for his final act wasn't lost on him. When he arrived, he parked near one of the restrooms, a dingy, poorly maintained building that reeked of disinfectant and stale air. He carried the urn inside, his steps echoing off the tile walls. Nathan pulled out his phone and set it on a ledge, the camera recording. He positioned the urn in front of the camera and stared at it for a moment, his chest heaving with a mix of anger and adrenaline. "You ruined my life," he said aloud, his voice steady but laced with venom. "You lied. You cheated. You humiliated me. And now, this is all you get?" He unscrewed the lid of the urn, the ashes inside a dull gray powder. Without hesitation, he tipped the urn over, letting the ashes spill out onto the grimy restroom floor. The sight was grotesque, ashes mingling with the dirt and grime of the restroom. He didn't stop until the urn was empty. Nathan stepped back, the camera still recording. "This is what you deserve, Emily. Nothing more, nothing less." He picked up the phone, stopping the recording, and walked out, leaving the ashes where they had fallen. The video stayed on his phone for days, a grim trophy of his revenge. But Nathan wasn't done. He sent it to Robert, Linda, and Claire, attaching a simple message: "This is what your lies have earned you. Don't ever contact me again." The fallout was immediate. Robert called him within minutes, screaming into the phone, but Nathan ignored it. The texts from Linda were filled with outrage and pleas for him to delete the video, while Claire sent only silence, too horrified to respond. Nathan, however, felt a strange sense of satisfaction. The ashes, the video, the severed ties. It was all a way to reclaim his dignity, to show them that he wouldn't be their victim any longer. In the weeks that followed, Nathan found himself alone but strangely at peace. He had cut off all contact with Emily's family and blocked Michael's number after the latter tried to call him from the hospital, begging for forgiveness. For the first time in years, Nathan felt free. But freedom came at a cost. The memories of Emily's betrayal, the fire, and his own vengeful act lingered like scars. He wasn't proud of what he had done, but he didn't regret it either. In his mind, it was justice, a final, brutal chapter in a story of lies, pain, and betrayal. And now, at last, that chapter was closed. Nathan sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at the steaming cup of coffee he had poured but forgotten to drink. The house was quiet, almost too quiet, as if it were mourning in its own way. His children, Ethan and Sophie, were still asleep upstairs, blissfully unaware of the storm raging in their father's heart. His phone, resting on the table, buzzed, shattering the silence. It was a number he recognized immediately, Dr. Reynolds from Denver General Hospital. He picked it up, knowing what was coming but still unprepared for the weight of the words. "Mr. Williams, I'm calling to inform you. Emily passed away early this morning. Her injuries were too severe. I'm so sorry." Nathan sat in silence, his grip tightening on the phone. He had imagined this moment, even hoped for it in his darkest hours, but hearing the finality of it felt like a blow he wasn't ready to take. "Thank you for letting me know," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "I'll make the necessary arrangements." The call ended, and Nathan let the phone slip from his hand onto the table. He stared at it for what felt like an eternity, the reality sinking in. Emily was gone. The woman he had loved, who had betrayed him, who had become the source of his deepest humiliation, was now just a memory, a deeply fractured, bitter memory. Nathan knew he had to tell Ethan and Sophie. They were too young to carry the burden of the full truth. Sophie, at only 10, adored her mother and wouldn't understand the depths of Emily's betrayal. Ethan, at 14, was perceptive enough to sense something was wrong, but Nathan couldn't bear to expose him to the ugliness of it all. He climbed the stairs slowly, each step heavier than the last. Standing outside their rooms, he took a deep breath and knocked on Ethan's door first. "Come in," Ethan called groggily. Nathan pushed the door open, finding his son sitting up in bed, his hair tousled from sleep. "Hey, buddy," Nathan began, his voice soft. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" Ethan frowned. "What's wrong, Dad?" Nathan sat on the edge of the bed, his hands clasped tightly together. "It's about your mom. I got a call from the hospital this morning. She's gone, Vin?" Ethan's face went pale, his eyes wide with disbelief. "What? Gone? What do you mean?" "She had an accident," Nathan said, the words catching in his throat. "She was hurt badly, and the doctors tried their best, but they couldn't save her." Tears welled up in Ethan's eyes as he shook his head. "No, that's not true. Mom stuff. She can't be gone." Nathan reached out, placing a comforting hand on Ethan's shoulder. "I wish it weren't true, but it is. I need you to be strong, okay?" For Sophie, Ethan buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking as he sobbed. Nathan's heart ached for him, but he knew this was only the beginning. Sophie took the news even harder. When Nathan entered her room and sat beside her tiny frame curled beneath the covers, she immediately sensed something was wrong. "Daddy," she asked, her voice small. Why do you look sad? Nathan struggled to find the words, his chest tightening with every passing second. Sweetheart, Mommy had an accident. She got very hurt, and she's not coming home. Sophie's lip trembled as her big brown eyes filled with tears. Not coming home? Why not? She's gone to heaven, Nathan whispered, his own tears threatening to spill over. She's watching over us now. Sophie clung to him, crying into his chest. Nathan held her tightly, feeling her tiny body tremble against his. The weight of shielding his children from the truth bore down on him, but he knew it was the right thing to do. They didn't need to know about the affair, the fire, or the ashes scattered in a restroom. They only needed to know that their mother had loved them. As the days passed, Nathan found himself walking a delicate line between mourning Emily's death and grappling with the anger that still lingered. Her family reached out repeatedly, asking to be involved in the children's grieving process, but Nathan refused. He had cut ties with them for good and wasn't about to let them reopen wounds he was trying to heal. Robert called again one evening, his voice insistent. Nathan, we need to talk. Emily's gone, and the kids deserve to know their grandparents. They have grandparents, Nathan replied coldly. Mine. Not you. For God's sake, Nathan. She was their mother. Robert snapped. And you helped her destroy our family, Nathan shot back. You lied to me. You betrayed me just as much as she did. Don't call again. He hung up and blocked the number, the anger surging within him. They didn't deserve to be part of Ethan and Sophie's lives. He would protect his children from that toxic influence, no matter what. The memorial service was small and private, held at a modest funeral home. Nathan kept the details vague when explaining it to Ethan and Sophie, telling them it was a chance to say goodbye to their mom. He didn't invite Robert, Linda, or Claire. It was just him, the children, and a few close friends. Ethan stood stoically beside Nathan, his jaw set in determination not to cry. Sophie clung to her father's hand, her small fingers gripping tightly as if letting go would mean losing him too. Nathan said a few words, carefully avoiding any mention of the darker truths about Emily's final months. Instead, he focused on the good, her laughter, her love for their children, the happy moments they had shared before everything fell apart. When it was over, Ethan approached the urn, his hands trembling. I miss you, Mom, he whispered, tears streaming down his face. Sophie kissed the urn gently. I love you, Mommy, she said through her sobs. Nathan felt his throat tighten. For all the anger and bitterness he harbored toward Emily, seeing his children's grief reminded him of the love they still had for her, the love that deserved to be protected. As the weeks turned into months, Nathan focused on rebuilding his life with Ethan and Sophie. He poured himself into being the best father he could be, creating a sense of stability for them amid the chaos. The pain of Emily's betrayal and death lingered, but he pushed it aside for the sake of his children. They didn't need to know the ugly details of how their mother had truly lived and died. In their eyes, she was a flawed but loving parent, and Nathan was determined to preserve that image for them. It was the least he could do to shield them from the humiliation and heartbreak that had nearly consumed him. Even as he carried the weight of the truth alone, Nathan found solace in his children's resilience. Together, they began to heal, one day at a time. And though the scars of the past would never fully fade, Nathan vowed to ensure that Ethan and Sophie's future would be free from the shadows of betrayal and pain.